The Slip and Dip podcast, making his Slip and Dip debut. One of the best writers in the boxing game today, Mr. Ryan Songalia.
Hey!
Give us some insight on hanging out with Manny Pacquiao for 2 weeks.
Yeah, Manny
You're like basically part of the team.
I mean, I've been around for a long time. You know, Manny Pacquiao has been very gracious with his time. He'll stop and answer any of my ridiculous questions. And he's a pretty interesting guy. Like, you know, one of the things about Manny Pacquiao is that it's not so much what he says; it's like interpreting what he does. You know, it's like nobody behaves like Manny Pacquiao. There's a certain regality to him, and he's very reserved. There have been times where like late at night, it'll be like 1 a.m, and he's just finished playing basketball, and I'm like hanging around the locker room waiting for him to like comb his hair and stuff like that, and then I'll ask him questions. And just watching the way he does things, it's like, it's almost like when you're observing, like when you're shadowing like a CEO of a company and trying to establish, what their routine is. I've never seen anyone like Manny Pacquiao, and I guess it works for him.
Do you think that he legitimately got something left in the tank, or just that he found a Broner that kind of, since we're on the heels of Royal Rumble, that got him over?
Well, yeah, that's what I think. It was a perfect style. I had no delusions that Broner was going to beat Pacquiao. I thought that they picked him specifically for the idea that he would test Manny a little bit. But I mean, I think Broner, if you look at the way he fought the 12th round against Manny Pacquiao, where he landed only one punch, and you contrast that with his first loss against Marcos Maidana, where he was down twice and still was trying to knock out Marcos Maidana, you can see how little is left of Broner's ambition in the sport. He reminds me a bit of Hector Camacho in the 90s, when Camacho was, kind of washed, and he was just like, fighting guys like Trinidad and Oscar De La Hoya, hungry, undefeated guys, and was just content to go the distance, and didn't take any chances because, hey, you get hurt that way. So, I mean, that's kind of what Broner has become. Broner didn't earn that Pacquiao fight with anything he did in the ring. He earned it by being a guy that people want to see get beat up, unfortunately. And I don't consider Broner to be like a really relevant guy anymore at 147 pounds, and that's why I think a bit of like when he says those crazy things, it's like take it with a grain of salt, because he's just trying to make a paycheck the only way he knows how anymore.
Yeah, I agree with you. Kind of remind me like a Fernando Vargas, or what's the guy who used to smoke the cigarettes? Mayorga. He's kind of follow up in that realm. But it's crazy you said you about the Madonna fight because I was at that fight. And the crazy thing is that people don't realize he gets put on his ass. I don't know how he gets out that second round. And he was actually coming back and could have won the fight, and he got dropped again in the 9th, and that's all she wrote.
I mean, Broner was a beast back then. Broner was a really hungry young guy. When he talks about like you can't beat a bum fighting for a sandwich and all this, that's what he was before. Now it's just lip service. Like he really was that dude. Like he realized that he had to talk like he beat it. Now it's like hey, I gotta get this check. So I'm gonna say a bunch of nonsense and say things that are ridiculous. Like if you even notice, like Freddie Roach wasn't even upset when Broner was saying those bad things about him, because he was like, who is this guy? He's a shadow of who he was before. I think that if he could discipline himself and get back to 35 or 40, yeah, he could become a champion again. But I mean, there's no real big fights there for him to be had, and the guy's kind of a shadow of himself. But like, if you look at like the way that he used to fight before, he was a puncher. Now when he's fighting Pacquiao, he was pulling back on his shots. Like you keep those shots out there a little bit too long, counter punches coming at you. So I think that's sort of unfortunately where Broner is in his career, and he's not really a threat to anyone at the top. I couldn't imagine him going out there and beating Keith Thurman or Errol Spence or any of these guys. He couldn't get past Jesse Vargas. I thought Jesse Vargas beat him. So in my opinion, he should be 0-3 in his last 3 fights.
Dang. Yeah, it's hard not to agree with that, man, because he's just basically all talk. Like people tune in for the spectacle, like not for the fighting when it comes to him. It's kind of it's kind of sad because earlier in his career, he was like a guy that was like, okay, this guy, like, we are really thinking, like, hey, maybe he's the next Floyd. Maybe he's got that type of game to him. But all of a sudden, it's like he's partying too much, and he's just out there just talking. Like, he made a little bit of money, and it's like, it seems like he's content, you know?
You know, it reminds me of like a little bit like the '80s heavyweights. Like they called that the lost generation of all these talented guys, who really could have done something. And unfortunately, some of the things outside the ring, started to affect them. Like that's a little bit what I see with Broner. Like sometimes it's hard to tell what's what's just for show, because nowadays, like you see a lot of the showbiz stuff coming back into boxing, and that's sort of become just part of the promotion. Whereas for a couple of years, like we gotten rid of that stuff, but now it's coming back. So it's hard to tell exactly what's real, what's not. But with Broner, it's like you kind of have to look at how he fights and say, maybe this is just who he is. And we unfortunately have become an unwitting spectator to this charade, this spectacle of anti-performance art. So it's kind of it's a bit of a shame, because Broner was a very talented guy at one point. I was there the night that he had his best performance ever. He fought I believe it was Tony DeMarco. That was down in Atlantic City. And here's the funny thing about Adrien Broner. The reason why I used to like watching Adrien Broner is because I'm a '90s guy. Like I grew up with like Wu-Tang, Jay-Z, Nas, all that stuff. I would learn about new hip hop from watching Adrien Broner's entrances.
I didn't know who I know you're talking about, because when he came out and he got beat by Madonna, he came out to Little Durk. I didn't know who Little Durk was then. I'm like, this is what you want.
Yeah, no, even like with Danny Garcia, I learned about Meek Mill. I had heard the name of Meek Mill, but I didn't know he was really hot until I was like, oh, Danny Garcia come out with this joint. But like with Adrien Broner, he was like kind of a crossover figure at one point, where like I learned about Kendrick Lamar from him. Like I had no idea who the hell Tekashi 6ix9ine was until there's that whole beef before the Vargas fight. So it's unfortunate, because Broner had this opportunity to be a massive star, and for whatever it is, he just can't get right.
Yeah, I mean that's unfortunately where we're at with him right now. It's hey, you gotta live with it, especially like you were saying earlier about when he just says all this crazy stuff about like he won the fight. Like nobody in their right mind that saw a minute of the fight thought he won. So it's just like, dude, like you're not, like you're just sounding silly. Like it's not even good trash talk you're doing right now. Like I don't know what this is.
I gotta ask you guys something. Did you guys hear the remix? Of I controlled the fight. It's like when he's like saying, I'll beat that boy. I'll beat that boy."
Oh my God.
Someone made a remix of that, and it's funny because that was the hottest joint that Adrien Broner ever made on accident. Like he had, his music that he really makes isn't that good, but that was dope, and the video with it too. Like I mean, it was like I had that song in my head for like the last couple of days. It's like, I'll beat that boy. I'll beat that boy. I beat him. I beat him. I beat him.
The internet remains undefeated with the memes.
Yes.
Oh my God. Yeah, man, that's crazy. Did you watch Keith Thurman's fight?
Yeah, I was there last night.
That's right. So what did you think about it, how he looked? I mean, he's off for 20 months or something like that.
He looked rusty in that 7th round.
Well, you know what? That 7th round, I was like, I was sitting on one ass cheek that whole round because, like, because like I was like, the script. Usually you're following scripts in boxing a lot of times because, like, you understand matchmaking, you see the patterns. But Keith, Jose Vargas is a tough dude, and that's a man that they call him the Riverside Rocky for a reason. And unfortunately, being a Rocky loses more times than he wins. But like in the big fights, at least, or at least he was supposed to in the first fight. But the way that like he came back in the 7th round, Keith Thurman told me that he thought he was actually out of range. And usually, like, there's not a lot of guys that are longer than Keith Thurman at welterweight, but Jose Vargas is. And so Thurman thought he was out of range when he got hit with the left hook, and then he backed up and got hit with the right hand that knocked his head back. So someone asked him at the post-fight press conference, was that the worst he'd ever been hurt? And he said it wasn't, but it was the worst or the best that anyone had ever followed up after you got stunned. So like he compared it to when he got rocked by Jesus Soto Carras.
Because his trainer slapped the shit out of him in between the rounds. You remember that? You remember that? I saw it live, but I remember I looked at the replay on TV. Hey, what the fuck you doing? He snaps that for him.
Yeah, and then he talked about Louis Collazo hurting him with a body shot, and he told me something that told everyone that something I didn't hear was that he had been dropped in a sparring session by Winky Wright by a body shot out in Lake Tahoe. So he was keeping it real. That's one thing I appreciate about Keith Thurman. Like he talks like almost like an American Chris Eubank, with the way that he the way that he delivers his things, and it's almost like he's doing a WWE promo. But the way that he's a very honest guy. He's very introspective. He's very philosophical in a lot of ways. He's a joy to have in the sport, and his vulnerability actually, I think, adds to. He reminds me of like a Larry Holmes was a vulnerable champion. Like that's the kind of guy that you have to watch every fight. Like if he's getting rocked by Josecito Vargas, there's no fights that you should be not paying attention to because this guy is must-see TV. So I think that. Here's the thing. At the press conference, there were about 4 questions asked about Manny Pacquiao. How many questions do you think were asked about Errol Spence?
None.
Yeah, that's the correct answer. That is the correct answer. Nobody wants to talk about Errol Spence yet because that's like
they want the problems.
Well, exactly. Well, not just that. It's just it's almost ridiculous after that performance to say, okay, this guy's going to go out there and be competitive with Errol Spence. I think that he needs to go out there and have another fight like this. Something where he can kind of get his timing back again. 22 months is a long time to be off for a fighter, especially a guy like him who's like a boxer puncher. He's not a guy who just come forward and throwing bombs. He's a smart thinking fighter, so he has to get his timing back. But the welterweight division is better to have him back.
Yeah, I feel what you're saying because it seems like he's so honest. He kind of told us he needs a year. He said this is give back year, so it wasn't like he was delusional. So his camp saying, hey, he told you he needs a couple fights because I know Earl. Personally, Earl's like 2 fights. What you talking about? And we saw.
But here's the thing: it's like I feel like Keith Thurman gets a bad rap for that because he's being realistic, like you said. He's being realistic. He understands that, he wasn't right for a while. He had the elbow injury, then he had the hand injury, and that's a lot of things you have to work back into. You talk about sparring and all that stuff. He had dropped weight. He was up in the 180s at one point. So he had a lot of things he had to get right with himself. So he was saying I didn't expect myself to be the best version of myself in the first fight back. So I think he gets a bad rap from a lot of fans. Like, here's the thing. Last night at the Barclays Center, I thought people were very respectful to him, and I thought that was great. But in the past, I've seen people boo him at the Barclays Center. And he's given some pretty good fights at the Barclays Center. The Sean Porter fight was there. That was an excellent fight. And they need to run that back eventually. But the last time I was there and I saw him, it was at the Charlo fight. So a fan went to go take a photo with him or something like that, and they're showing him love. And then when he gets close, and this is what someone else told, I only saw the confrontation, but someone told me, who asked him about it, said that the guy then started talking crap to Thurman once he got in his ear, and then Thurman was telling him back, whatever he said. It was there was a lot of disrespect out there by Keith Thurman, but this is a guy who fights very honestly, doesn't go out there and talks trash. He cuts WWE promos, but he's not disrespectful to guys. So I think that people need to lay off him a bit and give him some time, give him some breathing room, because the welterweight division needs guys like him.
Gotcha. What do you think about what's going to happen in the Spence Garcia fight? I'll be there. We got about 2 months now.
Mm-hmm.
2 months.
You guys are down in Texas then, right?
Yeah, I'm down. It's I
was noticing a pattern that all these fights that you have were Texas.
Matter of fact, I'm going this Saturday to Kovalov and Alvarez too.
That should be a good one. I believe it or not, I used to live in Texas. I went to Stephen F. Austin High School in Sugar Land, Texas.
Okay. That's right. My wife went to North Shore. Clean apart.
There you go.
Finish state champions.
But I'll say this much about Mikey Garcia and Errol Spence. I asked Mikey Garcia about this, and Mikey Garcia said, there's something that I see that maybe reporters don't see, and why I think I could beat Errol Spence. Now, I give him that. He probably sees things that I won't be able to tell, or a lot of other guys won't be able to tell. But until I see that, I got to say, listen, Errol Spence, man. I don't see guys at welterweight beating him. I don't see guys at lightweight beating him. I don't see guys at bantamweight beating him. So I when you saw those two guys together, Mikey Garcia, don't get me wrong, is one of the best professional fighters in the world right now. Very disciplined. He might be the best technical in terms of like, this is how, when you pick up a boxing book and if a guy does everything right, this is what he would look like. But that said, I don't know if he's going to have what it takes to back Errol Spence up, to get inside the jab. And Errol Spence has one of the hardest jabs in the sport, and he doesn't have to always land it. Like, he's a guy that doesn't worry about landing it all the time because he's a southpaw. Even if you block it, he's going to work off of that. So he's a very smart guy in the way he fights, and I'm a big admirer of the things that he does. So I can't see Mikey Garcia winning the fight, but I mean, hey, that's why they have the fights, right? Because a lot of times we talk about things that we think are going to happen, and then the bell rings and something completely different happens.
Yeah, that's big truth right there, man. I mean, we watched MMA and boxing. That was a big thing last night with Aaron Pico. I don't know if you follow MMA as closely as we do, but yeah,
that was LA versus LA right there.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, you got to fight, man, because, hey, at the end of the day, I don't care, like, how big of a favorite are, man. We see upsets all the time, all the damn time. And
see, I don't follow as close as you guys do, because, like, for me, I thought, oh, Fedor, I know that guy. He's going to destroy this guy. And then he gets, knocked out by a jab. I'm like, oh, damn, I didn't know that Fedor's as washed as Chuck Liddella's now.
Basically.
Yeah, pretty much. Because, I mean, it was just one punch and he's out, but.
And it was a jab. That was, you don't often see 30 seconds.
It was a look.
Did he turn it? Okay.
Yeah, he turned it. He turned it pretty nicely.
He turned it pretty late though.
Yeah. That surprised the hell out of me. But yeah.
Tell me this. When it comes to Mikey Garcia, well, there's two things. We don't, because like my buddy's real big on weight cutting because it's out of control in UFC. But I don't want to hear when he lose that Earl was a weight bully. When he come knocking on the bully's door, so that's his problem. And two, Earl's not really, really big. They like he's just gigantuan for 147. I seen his first day in the gym, not this time, but a couple fights ago. He's like 165. Like, that's nothing absurd. It's not Canelo. It's not the stuff Canelo be doing. That's a weight bully.
I mean, he is on the higher end of, the big welterweights. Like a guy that's above 10 pounds more than the weight I usually think is, that's a pretty big guy. I mean, and that's got to be, like, looking at him, the way he's built, it's got to be pretty rough to cut that. But I don't believe in the whole weight bully thing, just because even if the guy cuts weight, okay, as long as he's not doing anything unethical to replenish the weight back, I mean, there are benefits and then there are, the opposite of benefits. I don't have the thesaurus in front of me, but you know what I'm trying to say. Like there are things that like can hurt you also. Like a guy who really cuts. Like look at Tommy Hearns. We don't talk about him being a weight bully, at 147 because when Sugar Ray Leonard, put it to him in those late rounds and you start working a body. When you're that big, when you're cutting that much weight, yeah, that's going to affect your body later rounds. So I mean, there are pros and cons to being that big. That said, I think that a lot of people like to say things to detract from Errol Spence because he's so good, and I think that he wants. I think he'll fight anybody, and I think that he's realistic about the way the business works, and that he understands that a lot of people aren't going to want to jump in the ring with him. But that's why I give Mikey Garcia a lot of props for that, because I mean he went, like you said, he went calling for the Giant. Giant didn't come looking for him. Like he was Errol Spence wasn't looking up and down the scale. Like, I want to fight Mikey Garcia. Mikey Garcia went for him. So Errol Spence would be ridiculous if he didn't take a fight where a guy actually wanted to fight him. So I give props to Mikey Garcia. I do favor Errol Spence, but I want to see it play out, and I'm looking forward to that fight because I love seeing two undefeated guys really taking chances in their careers, and I think these are two guys that are at a stage in their career where I don't think that they will have a style clash that will not make for a good fight. I think that these guys are both very ambitious in their career, and I think we're going to see a fun one.
A two-part question. One, will you be in Dallas for that fight?
You know what? A lot of people, have been asking me that because I'll tell you something. That's Dallas, right? So I went down there for
actually,
the
it's Arlington to be exact, because people up here get all anal about it. Actually, it's Arlington.
Only thing I know about Dallas, I went there one time. Went there for the Margarito Pacquiao fight, and the one thing I know is that it's really hard to find liquor after a certain hour. So that's kind of an issue for me. But
Republican state.
yeah, exactly. I guess you had the blue laws, but
don't get my co-host started.
Yeah, we're not gonna go there. We don't have enough time on the show.
But I would love to be out there. A lot of people asking me, and I think that there might be the Box Writers Dinner out there the same weekend. But
what's that? Yeah, you bugged some dudes. The Boxing Writers Dinner's come out here.
Technical difficulty. I don't know. I heard some things.
Okay, I got to hit you offline there. I didn't know that myself. And then two, assuming Earl Spence wins, even if it's a close fight, knockout or whatever, I think eventually, say for instance he cleans out 147, he's going to have to do the same thing and knock on Mr. Canelo's door, because that's too big of a fight not to have in that stadium. You got the top Mexican superstar, the top fighter from Dallas, and they will be two of the top three in the world, assuming neither one of them lose in the next 2 to 3 years. That fight has to happen.
Let me tell you something. There's only one way that I think that would be interesting, and is if Canelo comes out wearing a Giants jersey, and then I'll be like, yo, we got it right here, No, no, but I'll tell you this much. I think that Errol Spence is a guy who will top out at 160 pounds, personally. I think that that's where he's heading eventually. I wonder if at 154 we'll see kind of like the way that in the early 2000s it was sort of a stopping point for big fights against guys from other weights. I think that you'll see eventually Spence go up. You'll see eventually Thurman go up. I think Porter, and then
big.
And that's a hardworking guy too. And I would love to see Sean Porter in there with Errol Spence eventually. Hopefully that happens at 47 in a unification fight. But I also think that I want to see Jamel get in the mix there. I think that Jamel has I don't agree with the decision in the Tony Harrison fight. I thought Tony Harrison fought a very hard fight, but I thought he did his best, but I still thought, even though I thought Jamel didn't fight a great fight, I still thought he won the fight. I would love to see him get in there with those kind of guys as well. There's a whole lot of, and here's my issue. Then you have Jamal, Charlo at 160. I wonder where he goes, because if he doesn't get a fight with Canelo, if he doesn't get a fight with Golovkin, what's there for him really? So I think that we're going to see in the next couple of years some of these guys come around the same weight classes, and we'll see some of those fights, or at least I hope so.
But do you think any of them get Canelo? Could you see Spence and Canelo fighting 2-3 years down the line, and assuming that neither one of them lose?
I mean, Canelo just signed. How many fights Canelo have on his deal? 100 fights or something like that?
10. He's 10 left.
All on his own?
Yeah, are there even 9 guys? We don't know who the guys are going to be. So I think that I think that they're going to start having to get creative a bit with who his opponents are. Like, all right, Danny Jacobs, that was the right fight. That was the right fight, to be next. That's a real fight at 160. If there's not a Golovkin third fight, what do you do then, huh? Like, you're going to get Turiano Johnson or something like that. Come on, you got to get creative, and you need to start looking around for fights that people would actually want to see. So I think you get Jacobs, and then if you get Golovkin next, that's cool. If not, I would love to see Jamal Charlo. I don't see a whole lot of fights at 160 that are very interesting. Even if you get Jamel, I don't care. I think that Canelo Alvarez, he's got the big bucks now. Okay, now you got to deliver. So I would love to see him mix it up with any of those guys, and I would love to see. Here's my issue with the sport of boxing right now. There's more boxing being broadcast now than any time in my life. You have apps, you have channels, you have everything, but it's almost like there's leagues. And I think that that's really bad for the sport. So I would love to see some of these guys come together and say, listen, Canelo's a bigger star over here in DAZN. All right, so I'm gonna get this approval to go over there and make that money over there, and I'm not gonna let the politics be an issue, and I'm gonna go for broke. You know what I mean? And I think that's great because especially for being competitive. If someone knocks off Canelo Alvarez, hey, that's checkmate right there in the sport. So I think that I hope that we see less of this division, and we see guys come together to make money. Because even back when Arum and King hated each other, they still came together when it was time to make money.
Yeah, that's the truth, man. That's kind of the thing that I mean, it's kind of becoming MMA in a sense with that whole thing. You know, I mean, there's in MMA generally, like all the best fighters are with the UFC generally. Like there's maybe like one or two outliers that would be like, oh man, I wonder if how he do in the UFC, like against like the top competition, and they end up coming over and getting squashed. You know, but like for the most part, all the good fighters in the UFC. I hope that doesn't happen with boxing in that sense, and where like it's separated out, like you were saying, over these different platforms where guys and contracts and all this stuff becomes convoluted, and then I think it won't happen with boxing though, because I mean they do have protections for that kind of thing in place generally, like with the Ali Act and stuff like that. But hopefully it doesn't get more convoluted than it already is.
Here's what I would love to see. Like one championship and the UFC just made a trade, right? And I was like, oh wow, like guys are
more or less
like Ben Askren just jumped over to the UFC, and that was the guy that a lot of people were saying, oh, this might be the best guy in that weight class for a long time, and now we get to find out. And then you have I think it was Demetrius Johnson just jumped over to one championship. So I'm like, okay, we saw that now these fights can be made. I hope that like if there's money to be made out there where like Canelo Alvarez could fight like Errol Spence, or something like that. That guys can say, listen, this is insane. Of course I'm going to fight Canelo Alvarez. Let's make it happen. Because that's not a fight you would just turn down. I hope that the barriers come down to make these things feasible.
No doubt about that, man. What do you think about this whole like recent trend of like these crossover things where you got Floyd going over doing kickboxing? Floyd did obviously a boxing match with Conor, and like that's kind of like becoming a thing where these guys just want to do that kind of thing now. I mean, it's always kind of been there. Like there'll always be like a weird one-off. We had James Toney come over. What is your take on that kind of thing? And do you think it'll be something that happens more in the next few years?
You know what? Because that's interesting. Because I always wanted to see Klay Thompson fight Tiger Woods. So I mean, hopefully now that this can happen, they have broken the barriers down, and now we're going to see the fights that matter. I mean, here's the thing. I thought it was hilarious because there were real crazy people out there who thought that Conor McGregor was going to beat Floyd Mayweather Jr. in a boxing match, not in like darts or pool or something like that, in a boxing match. So I was like, okay. And I'm sure I know a lot of people lost money because they what do they say? YDKSAB. You know what I mean? Some of those guys didn't know shit about boxing and they wound up losing their money. But when Mayweather fought McGregor, they did a lot of business because there's a lot of suckers out there for that. But I think that when you had this last thing where Mayweather shows up in Tokyo and he's got his headphones on, he was chill. He was like having the time of his life. He was treating the event with the seriousness it deserved. Like when he went out there and smacked around like a guy could have been his son,
He looked like a fan. My dad's like, "Why is Floyd fighting a fan?"
It was like, it was like the old 1800s. It's like where the champion then goes out there and fights someone from the crowd. Basically, and a lot of people say, "Oh, that was fixed." I'm like, yeah, these guys, this Japanese promotion would pay a guy to come over there and just humiliate their biggest star and make him cry. Yeah, that's genius marketing right there. No, but I think that I think it's kind of ridiculous. It shows a little bit of the gullibility of some of the sports fans. But it was funny because I remember back in the day, Mayweather talking all this crap about UFC back when it first started getting really popular, like really mainstream popular. He said some interesting things. I remember he said something like anyone can shave their head and get a tattoo on their neck and street fight for 5 minutes. And I was like, oh, wow. Talking about like shots fired. Floyd Mayweather was coming out guns blazing on the UFC. So I think that that investment back in like the mid 2000s when he was like taking it to the MMA world, kind of allowed him to cash some pretty big checks as a result.
Do you think he would ever get into? I didn't know the answer, but I check out when people ask me. Do you think he would ever get in the octagon?
Like as a referee?
Because he knows he's not gonna win.
Maybe it's a referee.
That's about it. That's the only way.
Right. I mean, it depends. Like, how many hands are tied behind the other guy's back? So it's like, yeah. I mean, under those circumstances, sure. But Floyd Mayweather Jr. is a smart guy. Like he has never been outmaneuvered, and he knew when to, like, this is what I'm saying. Floyd Mayweather Jr. is one of the greatest matchmakers of all time. Forget Teddy Brenner, forget all these other guys. He is the greatest matchmaker of all time and the greatest businessman in boxing history because, all right, Diego Corrales gave up his 130-pound title. Diego Corrales was chasing after Floyd Mayweather forever. And said, well, you know what? Forget it. I don't want to make the weight anymore. I'm killing myself, and I'm not going to get this fight. I'm going to give up the belt. He gives up the belt, goes to 135. Oh, Mayweather's now I'll fight you. Come back down to 130. Okay, I don't got a belt now. All right. So he has to cut all that weight, and then and he's he's facing charges. He's not in a good place in mind, and Mayweather went out there and dropped him 100 times. And then when he fought against Oscar De La Hoya, he knew that Oscar De La Hoya was the biggest star. So he said, all right, listen, you get everything you want. You get the gloves, you get whatever you want. You introduce first, second, you get introduced third time if you want. Like he went out there and made the concessions so that he can get that fight made. It beat him, and then he became a star. Floyd Mayweather Jr. is a very smart guy. I don't think he would ever enter into a situation where he would not have the upper hand. That's why whenever a Floyd Mayweather fight gets made, it was, oh, that's ridiculous. He can't fight Canelo Alvarez. Well, yeah, he can because if he doesn't make these fights to lose them. So if he's making that fight, he knows he's going to win that fight.
I laugh when he fought Canelo. He's too young. I think people slipping on Danny Jacobs how dangerous he is for Canelo. Canelo's going to be in for a long day. I co-signed to put my money down because I plan on being out there for the fight, but I'm leaning towards Jacobs because just putting it in straight style. How many brothers have you seen Canelo that are slick and move look good against? I can tell you, zero.
Well, I'm trying to think here because, like, if you look at the way that Canelo fights, he really has become more of a counterpuncher where, like, he likes a guy who's going to come forward, not throwing a whole lot of stuff, maybe one or two punches. Yeah, be right in front of him, and he can like land his punches because he doesn't throw a lot of punches. He throws like 30 punches around, but he gets a lot. It's like in a weird way, he's almost like Roy Jones in that he's so efficient in that output. But going back to I believe this fight was down in Texas also. Austin Trout, when he fought Austin Trout was a guy that was giving him a lot of difficulty. Erislandy Lara,
Floyd, of course. What's the common denominator besides the being brothers? They don't stay still.
Yeah,
they don't stand in front of you. And the only reason the Trout fight didn't get as dangerous, I had to talk about my state. What the F is Texas doing having opening scoring? Because I'm pretty sure you're a boxing historian. We haven't seen the Canelo shuffle since that fight.
Well, I'll tell you this much. This is why I do not like open scoring. I'm not accusing anyone of any impropriety, but if there was going to be something like that, after 8 rounds, the other judges know what the other scores are. So we've heard accusations from AIBA or about AIBA where they were like doing hand signals and stuff like that to other judges when it came to like fixing what score is this, what score is that. Like these were the accusations that were out there. With open scoring, you don't need to do that because now everyone knows what the scores are after 8 rounds, and if there was going to be something, like the judges would know where everyone is in the fight. So I think that I'm not a big fan of open scoring for that reason. And I remember, I think it was Miguel Cotto against Octay Arcal. Octay Arcal was behind in the fight, and I guess that the corner heard the scores, and they said, you know what, we can't win the fight anyway by decision. They stopped the fight. So I don't like that. It brings that element into the sport where it could be one more thing that can complicate things. And like I remember when the WBC, I was when I was writing a story about when they had the issue with a fight in Australia. And they said, well, clearly the referee wasn't biased because he took a point away. I'm like, yeah, after it was in the 9th round or something like that, he knew what the scores were. So I'm not saying he was doing anything, that was illegal or unethical, but if he was so inclined to, he would have known he had how many points he could. Yeah, he had a cushion. How many points he could take away. So I think it adds an element to the sport that can be abused. So I'm not a fan of the open scoring myself personally.
No doubt about that, man. Ryan Songalia, man, thanks you for coming on the show, man. We appreciate.
Thank you for having me.
Tell all the people where they can find you online and all your work and all that good stuff.
You can find me at Ryan Songalia on Twitter. You can find me at the store. I'm at the store a lot. You can find me, at ringside. You can find me on everything. I'm all over the place. All right.
Hey, sounds good to me, man. Thanks for coming on the show. We appreciate
Thank you for having me. I had a great time here.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely. There you guys.